Okay, I'm going to turn this around so you don't see the light. All right, I am back and I was going to do a live, but my account is not allowed to do lives yet. So, yeah, so I'm going to record this and then I will upload it. So today I am going to be talking about the book that the girls in my Islamic school were taught from, um, because uh, we were not taught um, to read. We were not taught to write. We were not um, instructed to memorize the Quran. We were only taught from this one particular book, and it's called Principles of Marriage and Family Ethics. And the entire curriculum for girls in Islamic school was just how to be a good wife. And in my community that I grew up in, it was like um, a widely said thing that if a girl reached 15 and wasn't married, then there was probably something wrong with her family or something shady about the girl. Um, so girls started getting married at 13. I don't know of anybody that got married younger than 13. Even though Islamically you can get married at 9 years old, but thankfully culture was there to save us from having to get married that young. Um, so 13 was the age that was usually started. 14 was the age that a lot of girls were married at, and then some people were married like right when they turned 15. Um, a lot of people were pregnant by 15. Some girls were still allowed to go to high school and finish out, depending upon what their husband said. So at the time in my community, I can only imagine what it looked like to the outside world when all these hijabi girls are, some obviously would have stopped going to school and did stop going to school. My That's my cat. But some husbands let them go, and then they're going to be pregnant at 15, 16, going to high school, wearing hijab, and telling the school officials that they're not married because they were made to get um, welfare benefits. And so they had to say that they weren't married. And I wonder, I thought about this at the time, like, how does this look to them that we're wearing hijab for modesty? And then these teenage girls are showing up pregnant and not being able to tell anybody that they're married because they're too young to be married. Um, so some of them eventually got married like in a court way, but these marriages were done in the masjid. The nikah was done in the masjid. Like it didn't matter about American paperwork, so it didn't matter about age or any of that. Anyway, so yeah, that was always something that really bothered me. Even then, even when I was a believer, that lying aspect bothered me. The age didn't bother me because at the time I thought that that was normal, and I thought that that was just acceptable. That was what God. And of course, when you're a child and you're being told, "Oh, you're old enough," like children always want to be older. Kids don't understand what being an adult is, so kids always want to be more mature, more older. We always want to. When you're a kid, you want to think of yourself that, like, of course I'm an adult. Of course I know everything. So when you're that young and you're being told like, oh yeah, you're an adult, like you want to hear that. You want to be an adult. You're not old enough to understand. You're not old enough um to really grasp what marriage means and what's going to happen to you. And we don't talk about anything like technical, so it's like you really don't understand that part. You just think that, like, you're going to have this freedom because you're going to have your own house, and yeah, it's not, you don't really understand. So anyway, so I'm going to actually read through. This might be kind of a longer video, but I'm going to read through, and I'm going to put a trigger warning on this because it could be very triggering. There are unaliving references, DV references. Yeah, so if those are sensitive topics for you, you might want to just skip this video and probably any of the other ones that are to do with this book. And this is going to be a few probably that I'm going to make. I don't know how much I'll get through today, but I'm going to try and get through a little bit. And this should be an easier subject for me to talk about. So hopefully it'll be, hopefully this will be a better video than the previous ones. Anyway, okay. So this is from the book that we were taught with in Islamic school. I'm going to read it right now. Imam Sadiq stated, "A woman who respects her husband and does not harass him will be fortunate and prosperous." The Holy Prophet stated, "A wife is duty bound to arrange for a basin and towel to wash her husband's hands." So I could stop right there and just talk about the fact that when you're told that you cannot get to Jannah, you cannot get to heaven unless your husband is pleased with you. So husband, it's like a pyramid scheme. Husband serves Allah, wife serves husband, right? So to say you're duty bound to bring a basin and towel to wash your husband's hands, which by the way, I did every single day that I was married, all the days that he came home. Like, you can't just turn on the water and wash your hands in the sink like a normal person. Like, I have to literally cater to you like a slave. And I thought that this was normal because I was literally trained to cater to this man like he was some kind of king and I was just some kind of servant. Like, it's disgusting. It really is disgusting. As an adult reading this, it really upset me that I bought into this so completely. But it gets much, much worse. So I'm going to keep reading. "Be careful not to humiliate him. Do not talk to him harshly. Do not abuse him. Do not be inattentive to him. And do not call him by any obscene titles. If you offend him, he, in turn, will insult you. Eventually, the spirit of love and trust will erode. Consequently, you will have constant quarrels and arguments, which may lead to a divorce. Even if you continue to live together, your lives will surely be filled with many turbulent moments. Feelings of antagonism and psychological disturbances may build up to the point that it becomes hazardous to the couple's life, in that it may lead to crime. The following stories illustrate some of these points." Turn the page. "A 22-year-old man stabbed his 19-year-old wife to death after he was abused by her. In the court, he said, 'I married this woman a year ago. At the beginning, she loved me very much, but it wasn't long before she changed and started to humiliate me. She used abusive language with me over the smallest issue, and she made fun of me due to a squint in my left eye. One day she called me a blind ass, and I became furious, so I stabbed her 15 times with a knife.'" So, as a young girl with a brain that is still developing, kids are sponges. We all understand this, right? That children are just like, their brains are growing, and what you put in there is like neurologically how your brain develops. So like neurologically, our brains are developing with this idea that we have to serve this man. And mind you, this man that we're going to be married to is a stranger, and he's going to be a full grown adult. A full grown adult. Meanwhile, we are young, barely teenage girls. We are child brides to full grown men who we are expected to act like literal servants to. And we are being groomed to do this in Islamic school by an imam who also happens to be, I already told you guys what he was, so I'm not going to get into that again. But so, I mean, of course he would pick this book, and of course he would want us to be these timid, subservient, afraid girls who think that if we don't serve these husbands enough and properly, of course it's just going to lead to them killing us. Like, that had to be normalized. It had to be normalized to us that if we didn't do this right, then of course the logical thing is that these men are going to hurt us and they're going to abuse us, and they just might kill us, because otherwise we wouldn't have gone along with any of this. So like, that was the first example that was given. Now I'm going to keep reading. Ooh. A 71-year-old man who had killed his wife explained, "Suddenly, her manners towards me changed and she started to ignore me. One day, she called me an intolerable man. I realized she didn't love me anymore. I got suspicious of her and killed her with 2 blows of an axe." So, I like how this starts with a 22-year-old man killing his 19-year-old wife, and then it goes to a 71-year-old man who killed his wife. Of course, it doesn't say how old she is. It doesn't say how old the wife of the 71-year-old man was, and I'm guessing that's because she was so much younger than him that we would have been like, ew, why is a 71-year-old married to a, I don't know how old she was, but I do find issue with the fact that when it's a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old, it says the ages, but then when it's a 71-year-old, it's just his wife, right? No age given. And this one is even worse because now this one doesn't say how long they've been married, right? Suddenly her manners towards me changed and she started to ignore me. She started to ignore me. Meanwhile, the Quran literally gives specific instructions to men, right? That, if they don't like the behavior of their wife, then they're meant to ignore them. And if that doesn't work, then, process leading up to eventually beat them. But right, but if a wife, right, a servant. Oh, and by the way, this is crazy. I just found out that forced marriage, especially child marriage when it's not your choice and it's arranged. Um, so not only is that statutory RAPE, but it's also a type of honor based violence. And I didn't know that. I just found this out. So when I say that it is 20 years for me since I turned 18 and got a divorce and left, and I am still 20 years later, I am still unlearning. I am still learning and I am still piecing together. And like, there are things that I'm just now recently able to even think about for more than 2 seconds without going crazy. Um, like, it took so many years for me to even be able to sit with any kind of thoughts about what happened to me. I dealt with it by just literally not thinking about it. Like, I put it into a box and I left it there and I did not think about it. But it didn't go away. Like, it just, I had to use so much energy and expend so much energy to try to not think about it that it just messed up so many aspects of my life. Um, and I had to go through such a process and learn how to just sit with the feelings that come along when I think about it. But anyway, yeah, but like, this is really like a crazy book, and I'm actually, I'm so grateful that I was able to find this book and read this now as an adult, because reading this as an adult, and not just an adult, but an adult who's been to therapy, which is the most important thing you can do if you have gone through anything like this, if you've left a high control religion, if you've left any type of abusive situation, whatever that is, go to therapy sooner rather than later. I promise you, you will not regret it. And I only wish that I had done it sooner. Yeah, so reading this as an adult who's been to therapy, understands things, has so much to go, so much to learn, but has, even with, just where I'm at now, is so different than where I was for so long and what I was trained to and brainwashed to and conditioned to and groomed to think and act and be like, specifically towards men. That it just is so validating, because I'm like, I am looking at myself with such a kinder light now, because I'm like, it helps me understand the relational problems that I've had my entire life. Um, and now I'm able to start dismantling those and and figuring out which parts of me are things that I want and things that are really from me, and which parts of me were put into my brain that I can look at and be like, wait a minute, that's not me. that was put in me, and it's just been in there for too long. So now let's do the work and get it out of there so that I can be who I actually am, and not just this programmed robot who thinks that men just must be served at all times forever, no matter what. Because if not, that's danger, right? When you're told, literally, while your brain is developing, that if you don't do this right, you might get killed, your brain develops in a danger way. Like, I have to be this because it's not safe to not be. If I don't do this right, I might be murdered. Um, so a husband is not a safe thing. A husband is a scary thing. Is a thing that you it's a test of how perfect you can be and how subservient and how obedient. And if you don't pass this test, then this man might kill you, right? And that doesn't go away easily. Like, even after getting a divorce and leaving, like, those fears and those thoughts neurologically did not just go away from me. Like, for years I had problems with not having any boundaries, not being able to stand up for myself. um it was really bad. It was really bad. So anyway, let's keep going on with more from this book. um this is a whole nother page. Dear lady, dear lady, at times of difficulty, your husband is in need of your attention and love. You should come to his aid and nurse him like a sympathetic psychiatrist and wife. What a psychiatrist could give the amount of care that you would give. I think they meant what psychiatrist, but they said what a psychiatrist. Yeah. Do not underestimate your ability to soothe and strengthen him. There is no one more devoted and concerned over your husband's well-being other than yourself. Okay. So for many, 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 many years, this advice from this book that was placed into my head in a very brainwashy manner is very much how I lived my life. I thought that my role in life was to serve men and to be their wife, which is the way it was explained to me and the way I was raised to be. Is a wife is a mother, a maid, a psychiatrist, a servant, all wrapped up into one, and essentially a blow up doll, because you are not allowed to say no. If you say no, we were taught that angels would literally stay awake all night and curse you while you were sleeping in your bed. Curse you. So there was no such thing as saying no. We were told over and over and over again that a wife is not allowed to say no to her husband. Like, that was just simply not an option. You are not allowed to say no. And if you do, this is the punishment. First of all, if you say no, since you're not allowed to do that, he can just do it anyway, because you're not allowed to say no as a wife, right? So that's his right. Your body is his right. He has a right to your body all times, except when you are on your monthlies. Sorry. So other than that, he is allowed you. Like, he has rights over your body, and you're not allowed to say no to him, right? So how can it be consensual, right? Forget about the age thing for a second, right? Like, forget about the fact that it wasn't consensual anyway, because of the fact that this is a stranger who is like 2.5 times my age, right? And I'm not even old enough to consent. Forget about that for a second. Let's just put that to the side, put a pin in it for now, right? Because what I want to talk about, it doesn't just go for my situation, right? It goes for literally any and all Muslim women who are taught and told from childhood that you are not allowed to say no to your husband, right? So you cannot consent to something if you are being deceived with fears and threats. And a fear of hell and a threat of hell, that is a deception used to manipulate and control women into always having to have relations with husbands regardless of whether or not they want to do so. So when you believe that and when you're told that, then regardless of whether or not you consent, you're not ever really truly consenting to anything because you have been brainwashed that there's no other option. Like, consent is not even a word that's talked about. Maybe some young people in the West are talking about it right now today, but I promise you, like in Arab countries and Middle Eastern countries, no, there's no such thing as consent. It's you get married. Now, this man owns your body. That's it. Before you're married, your father or your brother or your uncle, whoever your oldest male relative is, owns you. They're your guardian. They own you, right? Like, you are property, and then you are passed on. Now, mind you, they don't get to touch you like that. Ew, no, that's not a thing. But then, but they own you. They own your decisions. You can't do anything without asking them. You can't leave the house without asking them. You can't have a job. You can't go to school. You can't do anything unless they consent and permit you to do it. And then when they pick a husband for you, your objectness, your ownership as the object that you are, passes from your male guardian to your husband. And that's that. Now your husband owns you. And that is how it works. And we are indoctrinated into this system because, mind you, if you question it, and God forbid, if you leave it, you lose everything. You lose your family. You lose your community. You are now this sheltered person who wasn't allowed to do anything, wasn't taught anything, doesn't know anything, has been made to feel afraid of everybody around you. They hate us. They don't like us, blah, 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 blah. We're not safe with them. And now, if you question anything, you'll be kicked out. You'll be abandoned, if not worse, if not killed, because honor violence is a very real thing. And the police will not help you. Social services will not help you. Why? Because it's culture. And they don't want to get involved with somebody else's culture, right? So who suffers? Women. Always women and girls are who suffers in this system. And I'm talking about my community, but I'm also talking about so many women and girls that married into my community from other communities who I was friends with, who told me the exact same stories, coming from other countries, coming from other states within America. And I heard the same thing over and over. And there might be differences now. Okay, this was 20 years ago, right? So there might be pockets of communities, especially here in the West, in Western countries, where things are different now. But that doesn't mean that just because it's changed in Western countries, because you got like 1-2 generations here now, that the system itself is not going to create these same conditions if it's actually adhered to. If things have changed a little bit now in the West, that's because people stopped adhering to the system, right? They stopped following the religion, and so things got a little bit better. But when you get back to the religion, to the actual dogma of Islam, you're going to get right back to the abuse of women, because it is a system that is built around the subservience and obedience of women to men who own them. End of story. Full stop. And please don't let anybody convince you otherwise. Not some, apologist, quote unquote, liberal imam, not somebody who was lucky enough to come from a family where their male relatives allowed, and yes, it is allowed them to have more rights and more freedoms. No, that was certain people being lucky or certain people being in the West for a while. But we know we need to talk about these things because of the millions of women and girls who are still in the Middle East, who don't have the privilege to talk about this, who are suffering under Islam, and they cannot speak because they can be killed. They don't have the safety, they don't have the privilege, right? And a big part of my motivation, why I want to draw attention, why I want to talk about this, is for them. Of course, we will still have women and girls that suffer here. We will, but at least they have a chance, if they can manage to get out like I did, at least there's a chance to rebuild yourself, to figure it out, to, granted with trauma and damage and suffering, but at least ultimately, yes, took me 20 years, but here I am sitting here now ready to try and talk about it and make a difference, right? That wouldn't have been possible if I would have been born in the Middle East instead of where I was born. It wouldn't have been possible. So I don't know. It's important to me, and I know it's important to a lot of ex-Muslims that we, do talk about these things and we do bring awareness. So okay, let's go to another page. Oh god. All right. It is a pity that some women are ignorant and obstinate in their ignorance. It is possible that they may shatter their family life over a trivial matter. The following are some illustrative cases of such women. A woman left her husband and went to her father's house because her husband had bad breath. She was not prepared to go back home until he corrected his problem. On the basis of the husband's complaint, the court reconciled the couple and the wife returned to him. So, okay. So the court forces this woman to go back to this man. Okay. She didn't choose to go back to him. The court, and this is the danger of Sharia, the court forces her to go back to this man. Okay. So when the couple went home, the wife could still smell his bad breath, so she went in another room. The husband went crazy and killed her. I do not believe for 1 second that whoever this woman is, she just left this man because she didn't like his breath, right? Of course, I can imagine some awful man who's been making his wife's life a living hell going to the court and being like, she just left me because she said I have bad breath, send her back, and then the court, which is also made up of men, just being like, oh brother, of course we'll send her back to you, what a disobedient, horrible woman. And they send her back, and then now she's trapped in this house again with this awful guy. I'm just assuming here, based on my experience and the experience of every other woman I've ever known. So she goes in the other room and he murders her. And this is what they're teaching little girls, to brainwash and indoctrinate us into being subservient and obedient and scared, because any little thing that we do, right, going in the other room could get you killed, could get you murdered. And the way that they wrote the story, I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my voice. The way that they wrote this story, let me read it again. I'm going to start from the beginning. It is a pity that some women are ignorant and obstinate in their ignorance. It is possible that they may shatter their family life. The following are some illustrative cases of such women. So here's a story. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's very difficult for me to talk about this and read this without having like really strong emotions, which cause my voice to get a little bit loud. I'm not yelling. So they wrote this story. The way that they word it is this poor woman who has been murdered in her own home, in your home, which is supposed to be your sanctuary where you feel safe. The most safe that you feel is supposed to be in your home, right? In her own home, she goes into the other room and he comes in and he murders her. But this isn't told as a story about a man losing his temper or harming his family or anything like that. No, this is a story about an ignorant, obstinate woman who shattered her family. I'm sorry, she didn't shatter anything. She was shattered. She was murdered by her husband. If anybody shattered this family, it was her husband who shattered her, who killed her, who murdered her. And then to add insult to injury, not only did he kill this woman, but then they put her in a book as a a cautionary tale to other girls to not be what oh yes, ignorant and obstinate. Yes. So I'm getting worked up and that's no good. So I'm gonna leave it at this. I'm gonna call it a day for this video. I will come back because I am going to get through more of this book. I really want to give commentary on more passages from this book, and there's still it believe it or not, it actually gets worse. So but I'm gonna leave it here for now because I'm getting a little too worked up. So, yes, if you would like to continue going, and again, this book is Principles of Marriage and Family Ethics. This is the book that we were taught from in Islamic school as young children, girl children. Um, yeah, come back next time. I will be back and we will continue going through this book. But in the meantime, if you want to leave a comment below and tell me your thoughts on some of these passages that I just read, I would really love to hear what you think. And yeah, I will be looking forward to reading those comments. And thanks for sticking with me to the end. Okay,